I'm recording.
I'm
אוקיי,
here. I'm here.
דניאל, איפה אתה?
Right here.
הנה, דניאל, היי. היי,
Great.
דניאל. So, it's הבמה שלך for, you read what they wrote?
Yes.
Okay, so now it's your show.
Okay.
I'm stopping my share, so if you want to share, if you think
No. I didn't have anything specific to share about the text that
Okay.
that I put on.
So go and talk, we'll look at your pretty face, and that's it, we don't need any text.
Obviously, I agree wholeheartedly with what Alexander said. In fact, Berger, one of the major themes of Berger's work, as I'm sure you're aware, is specifically the tension between the individual and the group. The groups, the notion, Berger's sociology is built on the notion that group identity is built out of a conglomerate of individual identities. And therefore that the individual is really inseparable from the group because the individual is one of the people who creates the group. So I wholeheartedly agree. What's interesting about teaching or about modern identity is specifically the fact that people can choose to be the member of whatever group they want. And more specifically, that people can choose to be members of many different kinds of groups. And therefore, in different contexts, we identify with different groups and in a sense, become different people. I'm teaching now in a program in New York, which brings together women from many different backgrounds and many different religious affiliations within the Jewish community, and does a very intensive text month of textual study with them. In some cases, very intense text study of Talmud and texts that most people are not exposed to on a regular basis. And what's fascinating is the way that people's joining this new group of many different kinds of individuals affects the way they read text. I don't actually. There's a lot of background noise. I don't know who's.
I'll try to, 1 second.
It's from Dagmar. I think it's coming from Dagmar.
1 second, I will fix it in a second.
What is coming from me?
There's
Some
background noise.
The music?
Sound. Background.
No,
second.
I don't have.
Okay.
Sound, not music.
Okay, it's okay now. Yeah.
And Dagmar, turn a little bit your computer because we can see only your eyes. And now a little bit of your mouth. Oh, great.
Okay.
So what's interesting about it is the way that people step into this new community, this new learning community, and have to learn a whole new set of rules, of conventions. The challenge for me as a teacher in that community is setting guidelines in terms of what are the rules of reading. When we don't share, we share certain communal assumptions, obviously. We're all in a Jewish context. They're all women, which is a really interesting thing. There are certain assumptions that we share that are very clear from the outset. There are other assumptions that are not clear. In the past, for example, I've had classes that were made up almost in equal parts of Orthodox, conservative, and Reform students studying Talmud, which is a Jewish legal text, and especially in the Reform movement, where law and Jewish law is not a major part of the curriculum. Students have come to me and they said, "Your class is interesting, but tell us what to think about law. Like, what are we supposed to do with legal texts, given that we don't find Jewish law to be binding?" Those are the kinds of conventions that have to be set at the outset of any kind of project, and I think are important. In addition to everything I said, when we say to people, modern readers, here's the Bible, it has something interesting to say to you, and I think the next question that we have to be prepared to answer is, well, how do we read this text given that we don't share certain assumptions of the text? That's the point that Rav Shabtai made when he read it, and he said, it's very nice that you talk about reading this text in a modern context and how it can inform modern values. What ground rules can we set for how even modern readers can read this text. So maybe we'll talk about that a little later in the session.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Do you have any suggestion about, just in 1 minute, about the basic ground rules?
Okay, so in a very general sense, I think it's important. I mentioned in the paper Paul Ricoeur. So Paul Ricoeur builds on earlier categories in hermeneutics and talks about explanation versus interpretation, which comes from which is a distinction that Dilthey makes. Explanation, he says, is the understanding the internal structure and dynamic of the text. And then interpretation is taking that text and applying it to, sort of conjoining it with some other discourse. In biblical studies, for example, one of the discourses that people often join to the text is historical discourse. To what extent did the events in the text actually happen? I saw a fascinating paper recently on the Exodus talking about new archaeological evidence, that the description of the tabernacle in the book of Exodus is very similar to models of sanctuaries that we find in ancient Egypt. What does that do for me as a reader of Exodus? Maybe nothing. From a historical perspective, that's fascinating because it sheds new light on the historical background of Exodus and the question of did this really happen, and how can we relate it to the historical evidence that we already have?
But the question really happened. Does this come in to the? Because up until now, you didn't bring up questions of reality of things. You talked about the internal discourse of something, and
that's exactly my point. My point is, before you can do any kind of historical analysis and try to correlate what we find in the book with other historical evidence, the reader has to do an analysis of the text in and of itself, understanding the structure of the text, the grammar of the text. Ricoeur insists that has to be the first step. What Umberto Eco says about that is that the text does limit the structure of the text, the internal structure of the text limits the kind of interpretations that we can give. He's very opposed to the notion that anything goes. So that's also an important point to understand, that even though we're presenting this text to a modern reader and saying, look, this can also relate to your life, the first ground rule has to be, let's examine the text in terms of its own internal structure before we start drawing any kind of messages or insights into specifically modern life and modern society.
Meaning that we have to read it. We have to read the text as it is.
We have to read the text as it is, which is more complex than it sounds. But for example, somebody reading, Rav Shabtai sent out texts on the stories of Jacob in the aftermath of Jacob stealing the blessing, the kinds of tensions that erupt within the family after this very formative event in Jacob's life, and what is for him an extremely difficult decision to follow his mother's advice and steal the blessings. The fact that this tells a story of internal family strife is very tempting. It's very tempting for somebody to say, oh, this is exactly like what happens in my family, and then to kind of superimpose a whole psychological reading on the text. That has to be resisted at the first stage. We have to say, look at the text. What specific kinds of experiences is Jacob having, is Rebecca having, before we do a kind of psychological analysis, before we impose any kinds of theories of family dynamics that may come from 20th century assumptions. That's one of the things that Ricoeur and Eco both emphasize when they talk about how we read.
You suggest that we should adopt this. You think it's a good idea to adopt this
Yes.
method.
Yes.
Okay, Odi, הבמה שלך, if you want to present the text, the first text with Eliezer and Rivka, and we'll start, okay?
גולי, אתה יכול?
I would
Yes,
like to
Magda.
ask I would like to ask one question. You just answered the question already a little bit. What do you exactly mean if you say to read the text as it is? You gave one example, but the question is when it is enough. When did we get close enough to the text to say, okay, now we have understand his structure, and then we can go further? Because this is already full of decisions, because it's not normally not clear what a text is, even if you go on the level without taking and psychoanalyze it, but more even on the Hebrew level. Do we decide to translate this or understand this word from rabbinic Hebrew? Do we go to the Akkadian roots of the word? So it's more to say, I would like to say it's quite problematic to have this point where we say we read the text as it is, especially as the Hebrew Bible scholar, I would point that out.
I'll tell you, before I let Danielle answer, I'll tell you what my feeling is, that it's a personal decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's purely personal, meaning I decide that I see the text enough. It's enough for me. I don't expect any authority or any outside intelligence or I don't look for a seal of approval. I think that it should be very personal. As long as I understand the responsibility of looking at the text, when I had enough, when I decided I have enough. Now, Daniel.
Yeah. Let me answer Dagmar's question partially now, and I think as we go through the text, there'll be other points that emerge out of the text. I agree with Rav Shabtai that it's definitely a personal decision. It's very subjective. What is important, and you know, so any reader can say, well, how do I know, right? Give me advice for how I know that I am engaging directly with the text. I think there has to be a sense of whoever's reading that they are leaving something of themselves behind when they enter into a text. If you say to a reader, are you learning something new when you read this text? Does the text merely confirm all of your assumptions beforehand, or do you leave the text somehow changed, somehow more informed, more insightful than you entered it? Now, obviously, that's a very subjective decision, and it's something that only each individual can decide. They might say, yes, I left something of myself when I entered the text, and I come out and I find that, yes, it confirmed all of everything about it. I thought about it. So it really is a very personal experience, and a person has to be very honest with themselves when they enter into a text. Are they leaving something of themselves behind and giving themselves over to the text? Yeah, and in terms of the set of tools that you use, that's obviously very subjective. I might decide that I'm not interested in the Akkadian roots of the word. Now, I happen to be. That's a part of biblical language that fascinates me. But sometimes I start a whole grammar lesson in my class, and I see my students' eyes glaze over because they're not interested in that. That's something that I have to respond to as a teacher, but any reader has to also be honest with themselves and say what interests them and what tools are they going to be able to use to have the text speak to them in a way that maybe they didn't expect.
Daniel, but something I'm not sure of what you said regarding also what Shabtai said. When you say the text is, doesn't it imply that there is something objective in the text that all of us can share? Because the minute you say what I meet the text, I mean, actually you're going into the anything goes. Because if I want to read it in a way, then okay, we've lost the whole objective, hardcore, shared type of text.
Absolutely. And I'll get to that in a little while. I think it's helpful to have a text in front of us, and then we can talk about the way that what are the shared assumptions that we have to have. So why don't we go to the text, and then through the analysis, I will try to tease some of those ideas out.
Can I say one more sentence? Because I think it's important to mention that before we start reading the text, because we're doing a part of Christian-Jewish dialogue here. And I would say from a Christian perspective, it's even more complicated to get at that point, or at least for me, where I say, okay, this is my understanding, or this is now what I think this text means. It's not my language. So I have, especially if I teach, I have to make a translation, or I have to use a translation. Then we have the whole question of translation. And even I'm very aware, if I'm dealing with Genesis, that first of all, it has been a part of the Torah, and later on also from a part of the Christian Bible. So the point for me to say, now I get it, or here I'm standing, or this is how I understand, I think it's always much more complicated, or much, I can say from a personal level, to say now I really understood what there is, because there are so many different levels. And especially if I teach, and I did a lot of courses to teach Hebrew Bible to people who were interested, who had no idea at all about what they were learning here. Then I have to make so much explanation. I have to explain what a desert is, because people do know. I have to explain what Hebrew means and so on. So I think especially if you see it from a perspective of Christian-Jewish dialogue, it's even more complicated.
Absolutely, I certainly agree. Maybe we could say this for starters. I think there are certain principles or rules that the text does set out itself, and that any reader has to come to the text with. Within a particular group, you can also set certain ground rules and say, here are the rules that we're working with. We're going to take these as objective standards. That's not to say that another reader couldn't question them, or that the readers in the room in different contexts might not want to question them. But part of giving ourselves over to the text is setting those ground rules and saying, here's what we're going to accept. Here's where we are going to position the text as something opposite us, something that is different from us. It may make people feel uncomfortable, but that's but that's part of the process. So it will depend. Is this a pure, is everyone in the same room of the same religion? In which case, you're sharing one set of assumptions. You all share a certain set of identity criteria. If it's cross-religious, that's that you share a different set of criteria. In terms of Genesis, I think it's far more challenging to have a religious, non-religious dialogue. In other words, for a religious person to share the text with somebody non-religious than for two people of different religions to share it. Because I think Genesis is more universal than nation-specific or than religion-specific.
If I may,
as evidenced by the fact that so many religions have drawn on Genesis and said this is our heritage. I think Genesis, in terms of from the perspective of a religious individual, there is more that we share with each other than we necessarily share with an atheist, for example.
I'd like to say two remarks. What you said is fascinating, and this gives the dialogue its special flavor. And we have to. The thing is, if something is complicated and tiring, we should not, because it's tiring, we should not stop after we cross the language barrier and the cultural barrier and say, wow, we don't have any breath left. That's it. We cannot do more. We should start from there. After we did all this effort, then we begin to climb the mountain. Then this is what we should try to do.
Definitely.
and the second thing, just I told Daniel, I read Umberto Eco's book about text. He says 6 roads to cross the woods. He said that reading text is like crossing a wood, that every tree you can go either on the right or the left and continue to the other tree, go either right or left. But you need 2 basic assumptions. A, that it's worth crossing the wood. There is something good waiting for you behind the wood, so it's worth it crossing it. And the other thing is you don't cut the trees on your way. So you have to agree what are the trees that you don't cut, where the trees are. Once you have that, I think from then on everyone chooses its own way, and it becomes fun. So of course you have all the work that you described. Of course you have to do, but then we start, and then we begin to talk. Okay. Udi, Eliezer and Rivka, if you may. I allow you to share. רולי, אתה תעשה את זה?
Well,
אני אעשה לך allow share. אני לא צריך, אני רואה. You have allow share. No, I don't see it. I have to allow you. So you can share, try to share screen. Yes.
Okay.
It's a German.
לא, לא זה.
לא, יכול להיות שהלכת קרוב מדי, זה הכל. Until Rolly gets it on, last meeting, we read the Eliezer and Rivka story, and actually we're
By the way,
reflecting.
Eliezer, it doesn't say Eliezer, it says the slave.
Yeah, of course. But that's again one of the problems that we just said. Are we taking Chazal, for example, as a pre-assumption? What? Yes or no? Anyway, but you're right. It's the Avram's, and here you start with the problem of interpretation. What is he to Avram? Is he his servant? Is he his CEO? Do you say CEO in the German world? General director of his household. What is he, and why does Avram give this task to him? Why doesn't, for example, we'll see later on today the story of Yaakov. Why doesn't he send Yitzchak directly to choose?
Okay.
Okay. So we've come to a tree, so to speak, in the forest. Here's something that we have to confront in Genesis. There is a pattern of the forefathers going into exile and coming back. That happens at certain points. Abraham starts his life in exile, comes to the land of Israel, leaves to go to Egypt, and then comes back. We find that at the end of his life, Abraham refuses to leave the land of Israel and instead sends his servants. Isaac famously never leaves the land of Israel. When he's about to leave, God says to him, "Don't leave. You must stay in the land of Israel." And Jacob has a critical experience, the life-forming experience for him, where he meets his wives, forms his family, is where he leaves the land. So when we talk about the structure of Genesis and map out where are the trees that we're going to choose to draw a path between, one of the major factors is understanding the dynamic of in the land of Israel and out of the land of Israel, and specifically the relationship between the kind of geographical map between the land of Israel and the land of Haran, where Abraham comes from and where Jacob goes back to, and where the servant is sent to. Those are sort of facts on the ground. Those are critical structural elements that any reader is going to have to confront.
Now, the point that I wanted to show is really that there is a slave, a servant, that left Israel to ask, and let's see what he does. He chooses a wife for his master's son. So the master's son is not involved in the choice project. He's not there. He's totally absent. And the amazing thing is that the slave does not say, "Let me think what kind of a wife my master would like." He is choosing the wife for his master as if the master is an empty, we don't know anything about him, what his tastes are, what he prefers. And if we read the text, we see that actually what he's doing is some kind that in Hebrew we call nichush, and in English it should be called casting a lot, or doing magic, or getting an omen. It's something that is not really personal. It's the person divorces himself from the process and he says, "God, you go ahead and show me the way." So if we just look at the verses here, he says, "Hashem Elohei Adoni Avraham." If you see on the right, Rolly, רק תניח את זה טיפה בשקט. ויאמר, "השם אלוהי אדוני אברהם, הקרא נא לפניי היום, ועשה חסד עם אדוני אברהם. So, again, I don't know exactly what the German translation means. We spoke about translation. The word הקרא נא לפניי היום, beginnen mehr heute. What is really beginning?
Begegnen.
Begegnen.
Yeah.
To meet.
Meet.
To meet somebody. Or
Yes, he's across me, right? The Gegend is I see him, I confront him, right?
No. Begegnen is just meeting, or to meet somebody is begegnen, jemandem begegnen.
Uh-huh.
And what you mean is gegen. This is confront, I would say. So there is this gegen, but this has nothing to do with the root of this word.
I see. Okay, very good. Because in Hebrew, there is another meaning of akre, which could be likrat, like, likrat is to meet, but could be also mikre. Mikre is a chance. So mikre means that I don't do anything, you do it, and as far as I'm concerned, it is as if it was pure chance or lottery.
Mm-hmm.
You do it, and I'm not involved.
Okay, this is nothing which would work for the German. That's interesting to hear.
It does not appear in the German, right?
No.
And I say in the English, can you show us the King James Version of the Bible for a second, Rolly? Okay, here it is. Lord, my master Abraham, let it rest. Send me good speed this day. Okay, send me good speed is neither here nor there. But really, hakre means, it's you do it and I am silent. And also, I am passive. And look at the end of the verse.
Actually, good speed is what we use today is Godspeed, which means good fortune.
Good what?
Good fortune. Good.
Okay, but it's neither here nor there as far as the who is acting.
Right.
Actually, it's not. It does say, just take the chance side, and not the meeting side. So you have to flatten out the word. Because in Hebrew it has double meaning. The German version takes the minimum side of just the meeting, and the English take the side of the chance. And actually, it's a double meaning in Hebrew.
Okay. And then, but the end...
Just a second, I have the New Revised Standard Version lying in front of me, and
right.
There it is translated with, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today, and show steadfast love to my master Abraham.
That's more like it.
That's a third.
Like the King James Version.
That's more like it.
But that sounds, to me, that sounds very similar to the King James Version.
Could be.
But the King James Version keeps the idea of chance, which is very important for us in this context. Why do we need chance in meeting our mother of the nation? This is very important. This is
the question. The question is, I'm trying to reach to continue in the vein of last week's discussion, whether it's choosing a wife here in this case is a project of just opening your mind to God's messages, or it's an active choice. You remember we discussed it twice already. Whether I say this happened, this was predestined, that's it, and I'm just sitting quietly and accepting it, or it's something which has an order, a plan behind it. Let's see the end of the verse, which is amazing. V'aseh chesed im Adoni Avraham. And this is exactly in German. The word chesed is how you say?
Barmherzigkeit.
Yes, this is like mercy, right? It's really chesed. It's mercy, charity. Rachmanut is yes.
Yeah, it's Rachmanut, which is much more than kindness in the English version.
Right, and I think it's better. This is really I think the meaning of the context. It's Rachmanut, meaning I am not there. It's not because of me. I am not active. It's not a reward. It's not a reward. It's Rachmanut.
No. Luther often translates chesed with gnade. Gnade means grace.
Right, but here it's not. Here
it's not. It's interesting that he translates this time chesed with barmherzigkeit.
Right,
Yeah,
it's really wonderful. I think it's a wonderful translation. It's meaning I am not there. I'm like a beggar that sits here. I'm doing nothing, and you, out of your rachmanut, show me. You direct me in the right direction.
It's interesting that the new Lutheran translation is different. It doesn't say begegne mir heute. It says lass es mir heute gelingen. And this is again much more
interesting. So it's exactly akre.
Yeah, it's closer to yeah. It's much more closer to the Hebrew
wrote
text.
The modern translation? What?
It's not only one person who always renews the Lutheran Bible. It's always a lot of scholars together who do so, and they're going now to present a new one because next year in 2017 it will be 50 years after Luther took the thesis, and so there will be a new one in about a few weeks. But this is the one. Correct me, Axel. It's 84, right? The newest one.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last one's from 84.
Yeah.
To have a good translation is a wonderful thing. Yes.
Yeah.
It's really helpful. And also, he mentions twice. He erases his own personality twice. He says, "I am not there. You are the God of Abraham. And you should do rachmanut, chesed, im Adoni Avraham, not me, I am not there. Consider me transparent." Yes, it's very, very interesting. Okay.
The next sentence is almost opposite.
Oh, exactly.
It puts I am standing very strongly. I mean, he could have jumped it and said, and he came to stand or something like this, but here, he's putting himself in the center, in the second sentence, in that later sentence.
Exactly. Here we see a shift, tremendous shift. He says, Anochi. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, whether Anochi and Ani are different. One is a Cadian form and one is a later form of the same word. Ani simply, Anochi was the original, and then it lost the kaf, through the use, many letters are dropped. But if you really look through the Bible in general, I think they have different meanings. But I won't go into it because it's really not proven. But he say, I am standing near the water, but look at the end of the verse, ובנות אנשי העיר יוצאות לשאוב מים, mean many girls are coming out. He does not wait for a specific girl. You remember the story of Yiftach, where the judge, he said, the first thing that will come out of the house, I'll sacrifice it. He doesn't say the first girl that come out, she's the woman. No, all the girls are coming. So let's say, 50, 70 girls at an ancient town. Haran was actually a very big town. Maybe a few hundred girls are coming to draw water. And the girl that I will approach and tell her what I'll tell, this is the woman. And the question is, how does he choose the woman? There are several hundred girls there. This is the scene. All the girls are going to draw water. And how does he choose why should he approach that girl and not that girl? Beforehand, it looked as if he trusts to fate, to chance, but here he says, no, I'm going to approach a special girl, a specific girl, and I'll tell her something. So if you go to the next verse, it says exactly what it is. הנערה טובת מראה מאוד, Where is it? It's not numbered here, but Rebecca, here. The son of Milcah var, 16, verse 16. In Zer Shene Dynamet, exactly the translation. She's very beautiful. So it seems that what did he do? There were a few hundred girls coming out, so what did he do? He looked for the most beautiful one and approached her, all right?
I think it's both. I mean, I totally agree that the difference between 12 and 13 is very strong, because it not only says hine, not only anochi, but it says hine anochi. So I totally get that. But later, the point is, he's not choosing the beautiful girl, and that's his choosing. The point is, he's choosing her, but she has to answer something. And only if she says, this is what I'm going to do, then it's going to connect. So it's still something which goes with, would say, God's will and his will, because I think this is the tricky question here. If this is God's will at the end, what does it need from a human being to fulfill that?
Exactly. And what she says, it's not a chance. It's not like the old spy thing. I'll say something and she'll say the second part of the password. It has a specific meaning, that kindness, it has content. It is something that shows some traits, some personality traits, right?
Yeah.
That both she's a good woman, but also capable. She can take a project of water to camel, and she's a capable woman. So right, it conflicts. It seems to conflict with the choice, with the fate, with the that I am nothing. I am transparent. It's not my thing. You are. It's one directional, and all of a sudden he becomes active, and he creates the condition. He makes the filter. He makes the constraints. She has to be beautiful. She has to be kind. She has to be capable, and then God. This is the woman that God chose for my master.
This is really something I would like to open to all of us. Why is it really a contradiction? And what would it mean? Why have these two parts? Isn't one of them enough?
Isn't one of what? The fate, or Udi, explain what you mean.
Shabtai said truly that we see here a conflicting system. One is fate, and the other is trait. The character of the woman is very important. So
and the looks of the woman.
So there are three parts. One is the looks, the other is the fate that he asked from God, and the third is a very concrete type checking on who should be worthy to be of Avram's family. So it's three elements that are playing at the same time, and it's interesting for me. I mean, I'd like to hear other people, but is this just the biblical criticism would have said that this is a mix of three different sources,
three layers of text. Yes.
The question is,
it depends. I mean, you can judge this and saying these are different sources, and I love biblical criticism, so I would be one of the first saying that. But you could also say that this is a structure, because if you see text 16, for example, she was very far, I'm quoting now from the English text, very far to look upon a virgin, neither had any man known her. Also there you have more structure than it need. If she's a Betula, it's sure that she has never been with a man. So because this is such an important story, because this is the founding of the most important family, maybe it needs more levels from explanation, and it's nothing we could only that we could only I'm losing my English words. Axel, help me. Es ist nichts, was wir nur mit Bibeltheorie erklären können. Also wir können es auch anders erklären. I'm losing my words. I'm sorry.
Okay. I will try to translate what Dagmar means.
Thank you, darling.
This is nothing we...
we have an interpretation on an interpretation. This is very interesting. We're going to have a third layer, an interpretation of an interpretation.
Yeah.
You are going to interpret what Dagmar said. You're not going to say what you said, to interpret.
I'm the servant. I'm the servant. I'm transparent here. So.
No, now I have my words back. So this is nothing.
Right.
This is not a problem of the text. We can only solve through biblical criticism. It's always easy to solve the problems of the text that way. But on the other hand, I would even see is that it here, because the story is so important, it needs on different levels, not only one, but always 2 or 3 sentences to say what could also be said by only one. Do you understand what I mean?
No. You say that you should not try to do biblical criticism. We should look for a difficult solution.
Can I try to interpret what I think Dagmar is saying?
Yeah. Thank you.
We still didn't hear
without any German. Biblical criticism is a natural response to the text, but is only used in certain circumstances, namely where the text seems not to play by its own rules. Meaning, again, going back to what I was saying before about the text having an internal structure and internal grammar, there are certain things that we expect as readers and there are certain things that we don't. When biblical criticism is done well, it also looks at the text first and the biblical critic gives himself over to the text. It's only at the point where the biblical critic says, this does not make sense based on the text's own rules. This violates a rule of biblical grammar or is completely out of line with the way that the Bible usually does X or Y or Z. That's when a biblical critic will say, okay, I find 2 sources here. When we look at this text and the tension between the servant trusting God, but also taking a certain course of action, and also relying on Rebecca to take a certain course of action, the question that any reader has to ask, a biblical critic or somebody who's not interested in biblical criticism, has to say, is this typical? Is this tension between faith and action and between and between trusting in God, but also taking a certain path, between destiny and decisive action? Is this typical of the biblical text or not? I think any reader in this particular case would say, no, this is very typical. We find lots of characters who have faith in God, but also understand that God is relying on them to take a certain course of action. God says to Abraham, I'm going to promise you this land, but Abraham has to go. Abraham has to actually do a whole set of things, and Abraham is only chosen because he exemplifies exactly the trait that the servant is looking for in Rebecca. So no biblical critic would come to this particular episode and say, oh, I see a mix of sources here, because this text is very typical of the way the Bible talks about characters, talks about the relationship between actions and faith.
Okay, So just, Rolly, could you just put the וירוץ האבט לקראתה on top, roll it down?
Dagmar, was that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, it's always very complicated to speak in English and to read in Hebrew at the same time. This is mixing up my brains. And my point is, I think biblical criticism is a very important tool to deal with text. But, and I did it, I mean, my PhD in biblical criticism has 500 pages. But I think before starting to use these tools, we should always prove if there is not also another possibility to understand the text, even if on the first sight it looks like the only explanation can be 2 sources. Right. And this is what I would see here in the text, that there is a structure in the text to say things that could be said in 1 sentence in 2 sentences. Or in 2 words, and this is what I would see here in the text, and that was my point. And I'm sorry for mixing up my English. It's
very good.
But Dagmar, it's much more than just saying the same thing in 2 sentences. Actually, the sentences are different. Right? One is totally chance, the other is trait. The third one is beautiful. The fourth one is that she's a virgin. All of the elements are separated in terms of of the real life situation. So it could have been 3 out of the 4 or 2 out of the 4. So this is much more than just saying the same thing in different words. It's actually saying different things at the same time.
I don't know. I would only see 2 things in one: being a virgin and neither had any man known her, because this is exactly the same thing in 2 words. She could also be very fair to look upon, and so this is something which I would not say, because these are different things: good looking and being a betula at that point.
Okay.
You can also look at it. Many times you repeat in order to emphasize. Who says that she's betula? The author, or this is what the slave decides when he sees her? That she's beautiful is definitely the slave. She's beautiful. The fact.
Why do you say it's the slave as opposed to the author? It sounds like the author.
Yes, but that's why the slave chose her, probably. Otherwise, why to mention it? And I think that the fact betula ve'ish lo yeda'a, maybe it's also meaning something that you can see in the personality of the woman, that she's not a woman that hangs out with men.
And it's even not I would say it's even not the author, it's the storyteller.
Okay, right.
So because there's a difference between the 2 of them.
Right, yeah, understand.
Meaning the narrator of the story rather than simply the author.
Or the narrator.
Yeah.
Okay, but because when the slave repeats this story, he does not mention that she was beautiful. He does not mention that she was a virgin. That he noticed that when we go afterwards to the description of in the eyes of the slave, he makes it as if it was pure destiny. That was.
So this is.
He tried.
This is
what?
When we ask Kahanim on how we make decisions, he says, "Well, what he saw was a very pretty girl." When we ask the slave, he's going to say, "Well, I decided to ask her a question to determine her virtue." The narrator is telling us the Kahaneman story. He's telling us, well, first thing, she was very pretty.
Okay. Now, if you go into verse 17, you see there is an emphasis, Vayarotz ha'eved likrata, meaning he focused on her immediately. Among all the, let's say, 100 girls there, he focuses on her and he runs towards her. He's not standing there looking around and saying either this. He doesn't hesitate. He runs to her immediately, right? Meaning vayarotz ha'eved likrata. And then if you skip to 21, והאיש משתעל מחריש לדעת, והאיש משתעל המחריש לדעת, הצליח השם דרכו אם לא. So she's beautiful, she has virtue, she's a virgin, she's the right girl, and still he has to see whether God made him successful or not. He's waiting for the stamp of approval. I think it's very interesting. You see Daniel spoke about the choice of Abraham. It's typical in the Bible, but here it's condensed. It's very, very condensed. On one side, he's very sure. He runs. He's sure. This is the woman, no doubt about it. And now he sits back and says, now I have to know whether God made my way successful or not. In my opinion, it's a universal thing. It's not only the slave and Rivka. I think it's a very universal process of choosing a wife. You can never be sure. You're always in doubt. Even after everything, all the signs are right, and you still don't know. You have to know, and in order to know for sure, you have to decide that God made your way successful.
Axel, I think you look like you wanted to say something.
What's interesting to me in the translation of Luther is that he translates the Hatzliach, to be successful, which would be in German Erfolg haben. He translates it with Gnade. grace. Or we would translate Gnade with, as grace or as chesed.
As chen. It's Gnade is more chen, right?
Chen. Okay.
Gnade,
so
whether God gave graced his way. Very interesting.
It's actually going back to the original test that he posed.
Like
that
whether he blessed him. It's more the meaning of a blessing, right?
Yes.
He did something. He does not wait for the approval. He's waiting for the blessing.
And
this
Gnade,
is what he said from the start. From the start, this is what he asked for. He asked that God will give him grace. So,
yes, of course. Of course. And what's interesting, to be successful, that can be that can be this can be just in any situation, but Gnade, this is something that has to do with God, and so that's quite interesting that he uses this word here.
Do you want to check? I think I don't have it in front of me. I could check in Yechuneka, in the blessing in Numbers. I think it's also Gnade in there. Okay, I'll check it afterwards.
you're talking about the Kohanim, the priest's blessing.
Yes, but anyway,
yes, it's Gnade.
What?
Yes, just a second, I just check it.
It says God will bless you, and
Ja.
then it says V'yichuneka.
Der segne dich und behüte dich.
Yes.
Der Herr lasse leuchten sein Angesicht über dir und sei dir gnädig.
Oh,
Gnädig.
Gnädig, right. I
Gnädig.
thought so that, I remember this was the translation there.
Yeah.
It's chen. Yes, what we say in Hebrew, chen.
Yeah. Yeah. Chen. Verse 25 in Numbers chapter 6.
Okay. Axel, do you have it on your screen? Because then you can share it with us.
No, I don't have. I just.
Oh, he has a Bible.
You're using this primitive
I will show it to you.
gadget, the primitive gadget.
I will show it to you in 1 second.
Next time I'll prepare. No, I'm using my iPad, and in my computer I would have the text, but in the iPad I don't have. So I can join, or I can share it with you. So I have to use.
I thought you had a book I thought you had something really new, postmodern, going back to the book.
Yes.
What is the chapter 25, right? No, what about
chapter 6, verse 25.
6:25. Yeah, I got it. I'll share.
Dagmar, do you agree with?
I'll share the screen with you. 1 second. Here it is. Okay, you see it? Verse 25. Can you see it, or it's too small?
Too small.
No. Exactly.
It's okay, or you need bigger?
No, it's fine.
It's
Okay, that's it. And the Herr lasse sind eigentlich leuchten over there und dir Gnadig. Yes, sei dir Gnadig. It's the same.
V'chunecha.
V'yichuneka, yes.
Dagmar, do you agree with the meaning that Axel is putting into the idea of Gnade?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's Axel, and maybe you agree. The way he uses the word here is. Could we go to the text? Then I could show it again. I just was double proving if it's in the new translation also Gnade. And
yes, it is. It is. I checked it.
It is, and because normally the framework of the sentence, it's interesting because I cannot recall ever heard it that way.
What do you mean?
Can you see the text again? Because I'm having here another text. I need the. Can we have at the screen again, Rolly?
רולי להתעורר. He's on the phone, he's busy now.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you show us the text again, the Hebrew and the German together?
With the other thing?
Yeah. The one we read just before.
Exactly where we had it.
Shafta, you have to allow him share.
לך או לרולי?
לרולי.
רולי has sharing, אין לו בעיה.
כן, רולי.
לא, אבל הוא עסוק.
Here it is.
Okay. Normally, it's very unusual, I would say, and I do not know from another time, where it says, the Lord gives grace to his journey. Normally, the word grace is not used in that grammar construction. To give grace to something, like the journey.
It is gegeben, no? Gnade gegeben, that's what it means. He gave grace to his way. It's not, or am I wrong with the German?
Yeah, but normally we would not say that the Lord gives grace to a certain thing. Just the grammar is quite unusual in German, and I cannot recall to read it another time that way. Axel, do you know that? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes,
Yes,
try to hold back. It says that before. In Yeshua Matzliach, Rolly, if you can just roll back a few verses. More. In Yeshua Matzliach, more up. עוד. more.
אין עוד.
Here it is. אם ישך מצליח. No, it's not here. It is when he tells the story.
It's later.
When he tells the story, it's later. We don't have it, right? We didn't prepare it. So I'll go again to the site.
We would normally say, or the most wording would be, Lord, show us your grace, or Lord, be graceful, be merciful.
How would you translate what we just saw in Numbers?
No, exactly the way it is translated, but here, to give grace, how it is translated in German, to give grace to something, I would say it's quite unusual to read that in German in that way. Normally it would be give grace, be graceful, be merciful, but not to give grace to a certain thing.
I think also in the Hebrew, darko is not a natural way to say. Haim itzliach Hashem darko. I think the Bible itself gives it here a sort of a stress, and that maybe the translation tries to add.
I was about to say the same as Udi. This is in the Hebrew. This is also a unique construction. I don't know of anywhere else in the Bible where
it says here. Oli, are you looking for it? You're
doing
something with your screen. I don't see what. It's blank by us.
עוד שנייה אני שם את זה.
And Axel, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm just thinking, and
because I can't see your picture anymore.
I remember
he disappears.
I remember. I'm transparent. No, I remember a verse that I heard. Der Herr hat Gnade gegeben zu meiner Reise, but I don't remember where I read it. It's
One second.
It's here in the text. That sentence is here in the text.
No, it's in the not. It's in the third person.
Okay.
I remember it in the first person.
I know exactly what you mean. It's the next chapter. 1 second.
It's on the screen now. It's on the screen right now.
Here it is, right. That's what he says when he describes the story. You see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
42, but 1 second. No, but you don't have the German.
42. We have it.
No, you don't have the German. It skips from 27 to 49.
I only have the German that we had on the website.
Okay, okay. So I'll give you the German. That's what I was trying to do. 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll give you the German.
I'm stopping the share for a second, and I'm getting the German.
יש לי את זה. אני אחלוק את זה איתכם. ג'נסיס. איזה פרק זה בבראשית?
כ"ד.
מה?
כ"ד.
That's it. I have it. Share my screen with you. 1 second. 27. And this stupid thing converts everything to English. It doesn't think anything is worth anything but English. And Sprach, here it is. No, it's not 47, maybe 42.
42.
Kamish heute, that's it. That's what you meant, Axel. Right? Verse 42.
Yes.
Zum sprach Herrgott, meine Herrn Abraham, hast du Gnade so meine Reise gegeben?
Yeah.
Exactly the same grammatical structure, right?
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Same structure and.
By the way, if we're already there, why do you think the Bible decided to tell us the whole thing again? Why does he have to tell? I mean, he told them everything, of course, but why does he?
No, he tries to show that it was predestined, that they cannot argue. He does not tell them the whole story.
That's an important message.
All these actions. He just says, I was really transparent. I didn't do anything.
He's leaving out. He's specifically leaving out the human element, which we as the reader understand is important, or are meant to understand is important.
Right.
He's pointing out that not everybody in the biblical story shares that view that human action is important. They're in order to sell to the family that Rebecca should come with them, he's got to characterize it as pure destiny. And that is interesting in and of itself, that it marks a boundary line between the biblical family and other people in the story. The biblical family understand, the forefathers understand that there's a role for human action alongside destiny, whereas the other people in the story see everything as purely predestined.
I just want to show you Matzliach, how Luther translates Matzliach by Yosef. You see it here, the verse 2?
Yes.
Vahi Yosef ish Matzliach glücklicher.
Yeah.
Not Gnade, but also not successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It means happy.
But glücklich is not even successful. Glücklich is also happy.
Right, exactly. So it's like blessed. It's not successful. Glücklich means it's more than successful. The way I say it, it shows some spirit in it.
Interesting. Yeah. In the New Revised Standard Version, we have the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man.
Mm-hmm.
This is the flat translation from modern Hebrew. the more modern the translation, the flatter it is. That's what I feel, no depth in it. Let me see one more case. The next one. Pechi und sein Herzer. Glück, also the same thing. Gab der Herr. So it means also that God sends happiness through him, right? Gab der Herr Glück durch him. Through him. Doesn't mean through him. The Hebrew is, I'll show you the Hebrew. The Hebrew is, וכל אשר הוא עושה, השם מצליח בידו. השם מצליח בידו, the same thing. So the German translation is that here. So gab der Herr Glück durch him. It means that people like him. It's more than successful. It's something that brings happiness. And I think
it's the American dream.
What?
In the revision of Luther from 1984, it's translated more literally. Das ließ der Herr in seiner Hand glücken. Yad is Hand, Beyado in seiner Hand, and the older version rather would translate it durch seine Hand. Also by him.
I think that it's a bit mixture. You see why? Because it says, I'll share the Hebrew with you. You have the Hebrew. בכל אשר הוא עושה, השם מצליח בידו.
Yes.
So the modern translation tried to be more literal. Hashem matzliach beyado.
Yeah, and also in the first two, because it says, und der Herr war mit Josef, sodass ein Mann wurde, dem alles glückte. And then it's more like matzliach, if you say, dem alles glückte.
Exactly.
But anyway, it's quite consistent that matzliach, it's, I think, at least in the translation, it's more than successful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's more than successful, and this is very interesting. It's a kind of blessed. So we have to understand that what was the success? He says, I have to succeed. What was the success? And Rolly, can you share us again the text that we had before?
Yeah.
When does the slave decide that he was successful? Okay, look. And exactly, מצוין, יוצא מן הכלל, where you are is wonderful. Look at verse 21. And he's wondering whether there is res genade gegeben. Is he successful? Well, let's say. So when does he know that he was successful? Take it a bit. So he asked, whose daughter is she? And she tells him she's the bat betuel anochi. So, and go down a little bit, Rolly. More. ויקוד האיש וישתחו להשם, ויאמר ברוך השם אלוהי אדוני אברהם. Okay, he was successful. Now he knows that he was successful, right? He wondered whether he's successful or not. He asks, who are you? And when she says she's from the right family, then he was successful. So it's very interesting. I'm sure that this is the meaning of this is the only interpretation there is. But you say that the genade and the happiness and the blessing was that she was from the family. It seems like, this completes this spirit to the whole thing. And he says, Asher lo azav chasdo ve'amito me'im Adoni. So here again the translation is barmherzigkeit, means rachmanut. So God was merciful towards Abraham, and he came to the right family. And this, I think, is another element which is very, very important. The element of, we had the predestination, we had the beauty, we had the virgin, we had the character, we had the traits, and now we have something else which the Bible regards very highly, is the family. And the amazing thing is that the family as family is pretty lousy family. You know, they're all very dubious character. It was a real mafia family, which will be proven afterward, which will be shown afterwards.
Not sure, only the brother. You're not sure.
But not enough. He was the dominant mafia boss. And still, he came to the right family, so this completes the picture. This is the grace, this is the blessing, the happiness.
Don't you think that he's much more excited than we would expect? I mean, this is Avram's disciple or whatever, and he's, I mean, the Bible wastes a lot of words here. I mean, it's a big surprise to him. It sounds a little bit over response to actually just God did what he asked.
True. And also, if we talk about the problem, the dialectic between the transparency and the action, he disappears. He bows to God and he says, I am not there. If you say, Baruch Hashem Elohei Adoni Avraham, I am not there. I was led. After everything, when he speaks to God, not to the family, he says, I was led into the right way, to the right family.
And the grace is not for me. The grace is for Abraham.
Right.
It's not God graced me.
He's only representing Abraham. He's a stand-in for Abraham. So he's a kind of invisible character. Sorry?
He is his tool, his mouth, his ears, his whatever.
Yes.
It strengthens what Chaptai said, that he's taking himself totally out of the picture. Now it's only God and Abraham.
Right.
Okay. Oli? Can you show us the text afterwards? Here it is. Look, again, there is another point of grace. Even though it's very strong, very powerful manipulation of the slave. You see in verse 49 and 50, he says there is no choice, nothing. So he tells them that it's Freundschaft and Treue, okay, but again, Chesed, it's very interesting how Chesed, it's translated in very different forms in this chapter.
Yeah.
Here it's Freundschaft. And okay, but because these people do, not God. Anyway, he says, and they say, okay.
Can you let me share the screen, because I think I have it more clear.
What?
Can you allow me to share my screen, because I think it will become, the text is much more clear.
אני חושב שיש לך רשות שנייה אחת. One second, let me see. Odi Leon, share screen more. Allow, no, you're allowed to share.
Okay, do you
can
see
do
my screen now?
But you have to stop, you can share.
Okay. You see my screen now?
No.
No.
Adler.
No, we are still in Rolly Belfer's screen. Maybe Rolly, you have to stop share. Rolly's on the phone. Okay. Opa. Now, עכשיו אתה יכול.
Can you see my screen now?
No.
No.
You made share screen?
I tried. Rolly, can you give me the screen? Okay. Click now.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah. There we go.
That's it.
Okay, so very good, excellent. So here there was a fantastic manipulation, and they tell him that it came from God, that the thing comes from God, and they cannot talk. The manipulation was excellent. Go down, Udi. The next, go down.
A second.
Up, don't run away. Go down, down.
More?
No, go down to verse 52, 53. No,
Okay.
below that.
Even more. Okay, so I'll go out because it's I divided it into two chapters. So we did have 52, 53. We jumped to the.
No.
So you have to take back.
No, above that. אתה יודע מה, אני אראה לכם את זה. אוקיי, לא חשוב.
You didn't ask me to put this on. So
Yes. רק שנייה אחת. חיפוש. 1 second. רולי had it.
רולי, אתה על הקו?
לא. הנה, here it is. 52, you have verse 52? If not, I'll show it to you.
I don't. I have it till 51 and then.
Okay, I'll show it to you. 1 second. Here it is. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
No. Yeah.
Okay,
No.
look at page 52. At verse 51, 52. הנה רבקה לפניך קח ולך, and then when he hears what they say, וישתחו ארצה להשם, I think it goes, you remember he bowed the first time, and now he bows again, and it's very interesting. He was
Shabtai, you have only the Hebrew. Maybe you can change also
What?
to the German. You have only the Hebrew.
I know, you want the German, 1 second. What verse is it? It is 24, 50, 1 second, I'll get it to you. 24, of course. 24, 50. די כבר.
Yeah.
And here he says, now he knelt, but he doesn't say anything. You see,
Yep.
he was successful when he found her. Now he doesn't say, I was graced because they agreed to send her. It seems, if we would analyze it, his success was that they allowed her to go. But this was, I think, a result of his manipulation. He told them, people, you have no choice. You must let her go because it's God, and God is stronger than you. You know, you don't mix up with my God. It's not worth it for you. And they agree. And then, so the point is that the blessing of his mission was in the beginning. When she was the daughter of Rivka, the sister of Haman, this was the success of his mission. And I think this is very interesting to play between
There's
the
some
action
background
and the
noise.
inspiration.
Somebody has background noise. Can you check?
Okay. That's it. I think so. Now we have, I think that we should all try to consider our own, maybe for next time, we should try to, where is that? Daniel, you're with us? Daniel?
Yes, I'm right here.
You're right here. Maybe we should all try to think of how we explain the combination of predestination, of manipulation, of character, of family. When Abraham sent Eliezer, the slave, You only wanted the right family. That's the only requirement. You should bring a wife from the right family, from my family in Haran. That's it, nothing else. He added all the beauty and the personality trait and all this, and then he says that it was God sent. It came from God. Maybe we should all think of how to what does it mean to us in our person? Is it relevant to us? What Daniel said before, the idea of manipulation and blessing and grace and rachmanut of God, how does it relate to us? And let's discuss it.
Do you want to just give, I think it's good before we parted to give, just the first impression of the question that I asked. Is this story, the way it's written, is relevant to us as religious persons? About how do you mate? How do you find your spouse?
I think before we weigh in on this particular story, I think it's important to understand the story in the context of, I would want to put it in the context of other ways that biblical characters meet their wives, and also within the context of Rebecca's own life in terms of the way that she in fact is a very interesting character in terms of somebody who understands destiny, and that certain things are supposed to happen and certain people are chosen, but also that there needs to be human action involved in furthering that destiny. I think before one draws any conclusions from this story, I think it's important to put the story both in the context of Rebecca's own personal life and also in the context of other spouse meeting stories in the Bible.
Yeah, but you're speaking now as a scholar.
No, that's my point. I'm not. Meaning I am speaking as a scholar, but I'm also speaking as somebody who, in trying to look at the biblical text for meaning, it's a little not. This can be a representative story, but before we understand how representative this story is and what kind of messages it has, it's important to put it in the context, within the structure of the text itself. That's going back to it.
Sorry. That one.
And also the question is, because the question you are raising this moment now is where the text begins and where it ends. So if we want to take the text as it is, the question is, where does it start? And what you're arguing is the text is much more bigger than this text, because to understand it, we have to understand the whole text to get this part of the text right.
Right.
Of course.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Daniel, this is the assumption. You're assuming that the Bible is one total together, and that we shouldn't try to find our meaning from a certain part of it. It's the presupposition of how to read text. I mean, it's possible what you're saying, but it might be also a good way to read a text is to have a focus on this story and then see other stories.
Okay, so let me...
What we interpret now, and then compare it to what we could interpret then. My point is that this is why I said you're a scholar, because as a scholar, you're not so much interested in what is our relevance. And I think that in procedure, you should first check with yourself before you move forward.
No, Udi, let me just raise this point briefly, because I realized that we're almost out of time. When I want to look at this story for personal meaning, I also want to understand what are the really important aspects of this story. So, for example, when I look at this story in the context of other ways that people meet their wives in the Bible, one of the things I discover is that they always meet their wives at wells, right? So if I'm understanding the particular characteristics of this story, I would cross a well, meeting at the well off as a significant characteristic of this particular story. right? Because people always meet their wives at wells. That's probably where a lot of people met in the ancient world. So I don't think that has any particular significance.
What would you say today's well is? The bar?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. In other words, when we translate from the biblical text to nowadays, we might say the bar. I don't know.
Where all the camels come to drink.
Where all the camels are. But when I compare this story to other stories where people meet their wives at wells, this story stands out for destiny being an especially strong characteristic. Right? Not only is there one girl who the servant is supposed to meet, who we've already been introduced to by the narrator in the previous chapter, also he appeals to God in a more direct way than anybody else does. When Jacob goes back to the same well in the same city and a few chapters later, he also meets a member of his family who he ends up marrying. But there's much less of a sense there of there being a purpose and a destiny and a direct appeal to God.
This was the next text that I wanted.
Right.
Yes.
So that stands out only because I'm comparing this story to that story. In other words, it only emerges once I look at the bigger structure of Genesis and understand that there are certain conventions that are common to all the stories, and then there are certain characteristics that are particular here. And now I can start asking more specific questions. Why does Abraham's servant appeal to God specifically here? Is there something about Abraham's particular situation, or is this something that the servant decides? All of those questions I can start asking. And then, as I ask those questions, I can begin to move in the direction that you want to suggest, which is, what's the particular meaning for our lives? But I have to do all that background work first, otherwise it becomes very superficial.
But if you already did this, I could tell something much more serious difference, and that is all the others are the grooms themselves are meeting with their wives.
Okay, fair enough.
The only story when we have a matchmaker. We have something to lead.
Then
So what
yeah.
that means? All I'm saying is that there are much more than just one difference.
Yeah, and obviously that, and that's what I was saying. Why is Abraham's servant in particular appealing here? Is it because he's a servant? Is it because of something that Abraham tells him? You say it's because he's Abraham's servant. I have to think about this more. But you understand what I'm saying? That you have to view it within the context. You can't just read the story and then assume that, okay, we've read the story, now we can apply it. When I say it requires an intensity of reading that you're calling scholarly, and that's good, I think that anybody has to go through that because otherwise it becomes very superficial.
I would like to add one more point to Dagmar's idea about reading the whole thing. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, just look here, it's very simple. You don't need before, here is the narrator of the story that way before, several chapters before, like 3 chapters before, after the Akedah. So he says, "Hine ילדה מילכה גם היא בנים לנחור אחיך." Here are the names of the sons. ובתואל ילד את רבקה. Now Betuel had Lavan, the mafia boss also. But here it says, ובתואל ילד את רבקה. So Rivka is mentioned here. Why the narrator puts her here? So of course, maybe just for a point of reference, but maybe because it's a hint, here is Rivka, you should know it's really all predestined, and all the rest is only a game. Here it was said, here it was decided. Here is the end of the story, the beginning of the story and the end of the story. What you see afterwards is just the way it played itself out.
But you only know because of the story of the story that we dealt with, that this is the end and the beginning of the story. If you just had chapter 23 and not chapter 24, you did not know why Rivka is mentioned here.
You're 100% right. I just took Dagmar's point that you have to see the text.
Of course.
You have to know where the story begins and where the story ends. Maybe it's here. It says here, "Uvetuel yaladet Rivka." She is the one. Okay, now we'll tell you how it happened. All you have to know now how it happens. But that's it.
But it's like it's like a carpet, you know. There are so many seams that are woven, and it's very difficult to catch the end of the seam or the beginning of the seam.
I
right?
agree. I agree.
By the way, we jumped over Avram's command to his servant, and Avram doesn't say that he should go to his family. He says that he should go to Aram, to the area, to his origin. And here we're getting something much more specific than what Avram asked for. So, I mean, there are many, if you compare it to Rivka, who is sending Yaakov to her family. So there are so many elements that scholars should deal with, but I feel that if we don't give our personal meeting with the text, I'm not talking interpretation, but meeting with the text, we lose something very important for us as religious people rather than scholarly interpreters. Until now, we can all sit back. We could have been secular in this whole discussion. All of us have nothing religious until now to say about this, or nothing personal where it meets our religious personality. So I'm not saying that, of course, if you want to have the full picture, you could have gone much, even more deeper, even in this story itself, because we decided to jump over the instructions that Avram gave to Eliezer. So all I'm saying is, I think if you, and this is really a question of how to read text in a religious context, not as scholars, but as people who are looking at the Bible to find some answers for their contemporary existence. And I feel that if we keep, we can have 10 meetings of scholarly analyzing, if we go to Moses, of course, and so on, and lose the side of the first encounter. Even before we analyze the text, there's a first encounter. There's the holistic encounter, which is also important, which we didn't do. We already dived into verse by verse by verse and started analyzing. Now, I come from an artistic point of view, and in art, you first of all have the holistic. This is where you feel. This is what the story makes you move. And then comes the interpretive stage, and we jumped that, and I'm not sure that's so good for us as religious people.
That's interesting, because you're
speechless. I'm very happy if you're speechless.
No, you're speaking about it from an emotional perspective. When you say scholarly, you're saying that I'm too intellectual about the text and too analytical.
No. I have nothing against scholars. All I'm saying, it's one way of reading a text.
Right, I wish you had said that sooner. That you were thinking from an emotional perspective. But that's very interesting, because that's a fascinating question to ask. When the reader responds in an emotional way, where do we put that in terms of a hermeneutic experience? Because when you respond emotionally, I was saying before that you have to wait. You have to wait until you understand the text in its context and understand, the boundaries of the text. And you're saying
then you begin to cry.
Then there's a visceral response, and you say, I can't wait. I have this emotion that I have to get out.
You can't wait. You are Messiahs yourself. How do you say? You are making yourself impotent to the text.
I suggest we should stop here at this point.
Yes.
And we should, in 2 weeks' time, actually, it's okay with you? 2 weeks?
I think so, yes.
Dagmar, it's okay with you for 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I suggest something. Let every one of us prepare his own story or scenery. Udi makes movies. But let's try to have a description of the story. Everyone should prepare a 5 minutes synopsis of the story from his own perspective that really expresses himself. So we all know Genesis. We all read Genesis. We take upon ourselves to read some more. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll give a chance to everyone to make a synopsis of the story. Okay, is it okay with you?
But again, you have to instruct us. Are we looking for our understanding, our composition?
Everyone should decide what he likes. It's a matter of personal taste. we try to understand how to read. Everyone should do what they want. And if something will feel too scholarly, too dry, we'll say that's not the way. Everyone should try it.
I'm going to share with you a small story. I have a good friend who's one of Israel's important poets. And he goes around in schools talking about poetry. They invite the kids to hear him. And the first question he likes to ask is, when you see a poem, what do you do? And all the kids say, analyze. And because that's the way they were taught. And he says, okay, what else in life do you analyze? And then he said, and everybody is quiet. And then he says, corpses. The way you cannot analyze a live person. A live person you have to interact with. So we are making, I'm just saying, I mean, think about Mozart. Is the way to understand Mozart is to analyze the structure? I'm sure there is.
But here we are going into deep philosophy that is more in Rolly's there. It's really beginning to philosophize. I think we should all try to do it. Let's see what comes out.
I didn't say anything.
Great idea. I'm
looking forward.
Bye, everybody.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye, everybody. Shabbat shalom.
I just had an idea, a practical idea. What if the synopsis each of us will do in writing?
No.
Wait, just a second. And as a preparation, and I will put it on the platform so we can have an introduction, some time to reflect before, and then afterwards we will also express ourselves orally. But I think sometimes writing gives things that oral speech doesn't, and the opposite, of course.
I think we should leave it to everyone to decide what they prefer.
Sounds fair.
Okay.
Later.
Okay. Later. Bye. Bye.